Once upon a time, in a peaceful valley surrounded by green hills and golden fields, there lived a horse named Bramble. Bramble was a magnificent creature. His chestnut coat gleamed in the sunlight, and his powerful legs hinted at great strength. However, despite his impressive appearance, Bramble had one great flaw. He was extremely lazy. Bramble belonged to an old farmer named Tobias. Tobias was a kind man who had spent his entire life tending the land, caring for his animals, and ensuring his farm flourished. He had raised Bramble from a foal and had high hopes that the young horse would grow into a reliable workhorse. Unfortunately, as Bramble grew older, it became clear that he had little interest in work. Whenever Tobias tried to harness him to the plow, Bramble would sigh loudly, lower his head, and pretend to be too tired to move. If asked to carry loads of hay, he would drag his hooves, walking so slowly that the farmer often gave up and did the work himself. Even when the other farm animals helped with chores, pulling carts, gathering food, or guarding the farm, Bramble would find a shady tree and nap for hours. The other animals often whispered about Bramble's laziness. The old ox, Grindel, who had spent years pulling the plow without complaint, shook his head in disappointment. The sheepdog, Rufus, who spent his days rounding up sheep and keeping predators at bay, growled in frustration whenever Bramble refused to move. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Tobias sat on the fence watching Bramble doze beneath the apple tree. The old farmer sighed. "A strong body is of no use if the heart is unwilling," he muttered. The seasons passed and the farm continued to thrive, despite Bramble's laziness. But one summer, disaster struck. A terrible drought settled over the valley. The once lush fields turned brown, and the river that ran through the farm dried to a trickle. Crops withered and food became scarce. Tobias worked tirelessly, carrying buckets of water from a distant well to keep his plants alive, but it wasn't enough. One day, dark clouds gathered in the sky. The air grew heavy with the scent of rain, and hope flickered in the farmer's eyes. But just as the first raindrops began to fall, a fierce wind howled through the valley, ripping branches from trees and sending farm tools flying. A powerful storm had arrived. The rain poured in sheets, but instead of bringing relief, it caused a new problem: flooding. The riverbanks overflowed, and water rushed toward the farmhouse and the animal pens. The animals panicked, the sheep bleated fearfully, the chickens flapped in alarm, even the usually calm ox bellowed in distress. Tobias ran frantically, trying to guide the animals to higher ground, but the floodwaters were rising too fast. The farmer knew he needed help. "Bramble!" Tobias shouted over the roaring wind. "I need you!" Bramble, who had been sheltering under a tree, opened one eye lazily. "Can't the ox do it?" he mumbled, yawning. "The ox is old and exhausted," Tobias pleaded. "Only you have the strength to carry the animals to safety." Bramble hesitated. He had spent his whole life avoiding hard work, always finding excuses to rest instead of laboring. But as he looked around, he saw the fear in the other animals' eyes. The sheep were trapped in their pen, water lapping at their hooves. The chickens were struggling against the current. Even Rufus, the brave sheepdog, was barely staying above water. Something stirred in Bramble's heart, something he had never felt before. He realized that, for once, his strength was truly needed. With a deep breath, Bramble surged forward. His powerful legs splashed through the rising water as he raced to the sheep pen. He kicked the gate open, allowing the frightened sheep to run toward higher ground. He nudged the chickens onto a dry ledge. He even let Rufus climb onto his back so the dog wouldn't be swept away. Tobias watched in awe as the lazy horse he had nearly given up on became the farm's hero. Bramble pulled heavy carts of supplies to safety, carried smaller animals to dry land, and refused to rest until everyone was safe. By the time the storm passed, the farm was in ruins, but no lives had been lost. Tobias approached Bramble and placed a gentle hand on his neck. "You've shown me today what I always believed, that deep inside you were never truly lazy, just unmotivated," the farmer said. "But when the time came, you proved your worth." Bramble felt a warmth in his chest. He had never worked so hard in his life, yet he had never felt so proud. For the first time, he understood the satisfaction that came from effort, from knowing that his strength had made a difference. From that day forward, Bramble was no longer known as the lazy horse. He became the most trusted and dependable worker on the farm, always willing to help when needed. And though he still enjoyed a good afternoon nap beneath the apple tree, he never again ignored the call of duty. Moral: true strength is not just in the body, but in the will to act when it matters most.